My boyfriend put my late father's ashes into brownies and fed them to me. When I begged him why, he smirked and said, "I'm just helping you grow out of it." That was 4 months ago. This morning, he was staring at me helplessly from the defendant's chair. My boyfriend always told me that he would do anything for me, and I never truly realized what he meant until I saw it. Because we were 6 months into our relationship when my dad died of cancer. Stage 4, progressed faster than anyone saw coming, couldn't afford chemotherapy. I was 23, so I expected my friends to know how to be there for me. But for the first few months, I couldn't hang out with someone for more than an hour without breaking down into tears. At first, everyone was understanding. They'd let me talk about it for as long as I needed, holding my hand while I cried. But after just the first month, things changed. My best friends were making up excuses for why they had to cancel on me, take 3 days to reply, no one answering my calls. That's what I get for bonding with people over our shared love for clubbing and nights out. Meanwhile, my boyfriend Tommy was my lifeline. He would bring me fresh flowers every day, and if he was ever too busy, then he would have them delivered over DoorDash. I had no idea that he was going to ruin my life, because he was the only reason that I wasn't visiting my dad's grave completely alone. He never tried to shove my grief away and tell me that it was time to move on, never guilted me into forcing a smile and tell me that my happiness is what he would have wanted. So on his 1-year anniversary, I decided to volunteer for a 16-hour shift at the local hospice for cancer patients. I also made sure to play Scrabble with at least 3 of the patients, since that was my dad's favorite game. It's simple but deeply meaningful to me. Sometimes it was the only thing that would get me through the year, especially when I felt guilty for not being a better daughter, or when my brain tried to convince me that I could have saved him if I tried harder. Well, a few months before the 2-year anniversary, Tommy asked if I wanted to visit Miami with his family. I agreed, until he told me the date would overlap the 2-year anniversary. I figured he just forgot, but when I reminded him of my tradition, he snapped. "You're being really selfish right now. Can you please just put me first for once?" I furrowed my eyebrows. Up to this point, I had canceled dozens of therapy sessions because Tommy really wanted to hang out. Used money that was for my dad's gravestone upkeep to shower him in gifts. "Baby, I love you, but Sasha, your dad is dead. My family is still alive. The choice is very simple." I swear I thought it was some kind of dark humor, but then he just stared at me like he expected me to make a decision right then and there. My heart dropped. I calmly explained that it was the only day of the year that I used to remember my dad, that it was the only day that I could grieve without feeling guilty. But he just sighed and rolled his eyes. "Okay, I guess it's my fault for thinking that you would have grown out of this by now," he said before driving home. That night, I decided to play him and abuse his trust. I told him I would go on the trip with him and his family, but what he didn't know is that at 5 a.m. on the day of my dad's anniversary, I planned to organize a 3-hour video call with the patients of the hospice and play Scrabble with them on FaceTime. I would have told him, but, well, you saw how he reacted. Fast forward to the day, his parents booked us our own room together, and since he was a deep sleeper, sneaking out of bed was a piece of cake. Until it was 7 a.m., because that's when I was in the lobby and got the text from him asking where I was. Adrenaline pumped through my body, and I instantly told him the truth. He was typing for almost a full 20 minutes, and ended up not sending anything. When the call was over and I came back into the hotel room, he lunged at me for a hug. "Hey baby, I missed you." His tone was romantic and comforting. I went along with it, and we both acted like nothing had happened. Well, that was good enough for me. The rest of the holiday was smooth sailing. I got my tan lines, my freckles came back, and his parents practically treated me like royalty. The real kerfuffle happened when I got home. He decided to spend the night at mine, because he didn't want to say goodbye yet. At the time, I thought it was sweet, so I agreed. But when I woke up, Tommy wasn't beside me, and I could smell fresh brownies downstairs, so I practically jumped out of bed. They were my favorite. I had already eaten a square when Tommy asked me to guess what they were made of. His tone was daring, and he had a boyish smile plastered on his face. So I played along, thinking it was one of his playful skits. Is it Kerrygold butter? No. Is it tea made with love? By this point, his face fell, and he turned super serious. No. An awful gut feeling washed over me. "Check your little urn." I staggered over, feeling my pulse in my temples. The urn was empty. "Since you love your dad so much, I'm letting him live in you forever. You're welcome." I froze. My brain couldn't process what was happening. Did he just say what I think he said? I ran to the bathroom and stuck my fingers down my throat, trying to throw up what I'd just eaten. Nothing came up. I was hyperventilating, tears streaming down my face, the bathroom tiles cold against my knees. Tommy just stood there watching me, arms crossed, with this satisfied smirk on his face. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but he snatched it from my hand, his fingers digging into my wrist. "What are you doing? It's just ash. It's not like it's going to hurt you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This person I'd trusted, who I thought understood my grief, had just violated something sacred to me in the most disgusting way possible. "Get out," I whispered, my voice shaking, barely audible over the ringing in my ears. "Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic. I was just trying to help you move on." I screamed at him to leave, and he finally did, but not before telling me I was overreacting and that I'd call him when I calmed down, as if this was just a minor disagreement, not the most horrific betrayal imaginable. I spent the next 3 hours crying on my bathroom floor. I called my mom, who rushed over immediately, her face going pale when I told her what happened. We contacted the police, who initially seemed concerned but ultimately said that while desecration of remains was serious, they needed more evidence to pursue criminal charges since the urn remained in my possession. They took a report that suggested it might become a civil matter regarding the remains, as if there was anything civil about what he'd done. I changed my locks that day. I blocked Tommy on everything. I thought that would be the end of it, that I could begin to process this new trauma alone. But 2 days later, I found a note taped to my car windshield. "I was only trying to help. You'll thank me someday." I crumpled it up and threw it away, hands shaking, looking over my shoulder in the parking lot. The next day, I got home from work to find a bouquet of flowers on my doorstep. The card read, "You can't ignore me forever. What we have is special. Lilies, my dad's favorite." The sight of them made me physically ill. I called the police again. This time, they took the stalking more seriously, documenting the escalating pattern of behavior. The officer advised me to get a restraining order immediately, which I started the process for, filling out paperwork with trembling hands. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump. I kept thinking about how this person I trusted had done something so unthinkable, so cruel, and now he wouldn't leave me alone, his presence lingering like a shadow I couldn't escape. I stayed with my mom for a few days while waiting for my restraining order hearing. I thought I was safe there, but then my mom got a package in the the mail. Inside was a Scrabble board with a note. Thought we could play together sometime, like you did with your dad. The game pieces were arranged to spell out forever. I called my mom in a panic. She told me to stay put while she called the police. I paced around her living room, checking the windows every few minutes. How did Tommy know where my mom lived? I'd never brought him there. The officer who showed up, Officer Bradley, was the same one who'd taken my earlier reports. He examined the Scrabble board with a frown. This definitely escalates things, he said, bagging it as evidence. The department is taking this very seriously now. We'll increase patrols around both residences. I felt slightly relieved that they were finally seeing the danger Tommy posed. Officer Bradley's expression softened. Look, I understand you're scared. The restraining order hearing is tomorrow. In the meantime, document everything. Don't delete any messages. Take photos of anything he sends you. After he left, my mom suggested I stay with my cousin Andrea in the next town over. Tommy didn't know her, had never even heard me mention her. I packed a bag while my mom called Andrea to explain the situation. That night at Andrea's apartment, I barely slept. Every creak made me jolt upright. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Miss you. Sweet dreams. I showed Andrea, who immediately took my phone and blocked the number. He's trying to scare you, she said, her voice steady despite the worry in her eyes. That's what abusers do. They want you afraid. The next morning, we drove to the courthouse for my restraining order hearing. I felt sick to my stomach as we walked through security. What if the judge didn't believe me? What if Tommy showed up? He did show up, looking completely normal in a button-down shirt and khakis. He even smiled at me like we were meeting for coffee. I avoided his gaze, clutching my folder of evidence, screenshots of texts, photos of the flowers, the police reports, and pictures of the Scrabble board. When it was my turn to speak, I told the judge everything, my voice shaking at first but growing stronger as I went on. I explained about my dad, about the Brownies, about the stalking afterward. The judge listened carefully, examining my evidence. Then it was Tommy's turn. He put on a show of being the concerned boyfriend, claiming I was having a mental breakdown due to unresolved grief. He said he was just trying to help me move on in an admittedly misguided way. He even had the nerve to cry, saying he was worried about my mental health. I thought I might throw up right there in the courtroom. But then the judge spoke. Mr. Reeves, regardless of your intentions, your actions show a disturbing lack of boundaries and respect. The court grants this restraining order for 6 months. You are to remain 500 feet away from Mrs. Chen at all times. No contact whatsoever. Not by phone, email, social media, or through third parties. Relief washed over me. The judge believed me. Tommy's face darkened for just a second before he composed himself and nodded respectfully. As Andrea and I left the courthouse, I felt like I could breathe again for the first time in days. We decided to celebrate with lunch at a cafe downtown. I was halfway through my sandwich when I got a call from my neighbor Janet. Sasha, I think someone broke into your apartment. Your door is slightly open, and I heard noises inside. My stomach dropped. I thanked her and immediately called the police, then drove back to my apartment with Andrea. We stayed in her car until the police arrived. 2 officers went in while we waited, hearts pounding. They came out 15 minutes later. My apartment had definitely been broken into. My clothes were strewn everywhere, my mattress slashed open. But the most disturbing thing was what they found on my bathroom mirror, written in what looked like red lipstick. You'll never get rid of me. I started shaking uncontrollably. Andrea put her arm around me while Officer Bradley took photos and filed another report. We'll dust for fingerprints, but honestly, if he wore gloves, there might not be much to find, he explained. Do you have somewhere else to stay tonight? I nodded, unable to speak. The thought of Tommy in my space, touching my things, made me physically ill. Andrea helped me pack more clothes and essentials while the officers finished up. Back at Andrea's, I finally broke down completely. I sobbed until my throat was raw, until I had no tears left. Andrea sat with me the whole time, not trying to fix it, just being there. You need to tell your work what's happening, she said gently when I'd calmed down. They should know why you might need time off, and they should be on alert in case he shows up there. I hadn't even thought about that. The idea of Tommy showing up at the marketing firm where I worked sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I called my boss, Morgan, and explained the situation as calmly as I could. To my relief, Morgan was incredibly supportive, telling me to take all the time I needed and promising to alert security. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and paperwork. I filed for an extension on my lease breaking fee, applied for victim compensation to help with moving costs, and looked for a new apartment in a secured building. Andrea went with me everywhere, a constant reassuring presence. A week after the break-in, I was at Andrea's scrolling through apartment listings when my phone rang. Unknown number. I declined it, but they called right back, and again. On the 4th call, I answered, putting it on speaker so Andrea could hear. Hello? I said cautiously. Sasha. Thank God. It was Rebecca, one of the nurses from the hospice where I volunteered. I've been trying to reach you. There's a man here asking about you. He says he's your boyfriend and wants to know when you'll be in next. My blood ran cold. Rebecca, that's not my boyfriend. We broke up and he's dangerous. Please don't tell him anything about me. Rebecca's voice dropped to a whisper. He's still here, talking to Elliot at the front desk. What should I do? Call security. Andrea mouthed to me. Can you get security to escort him out? I asked. I have a restraining order against him. He's not supposed to be anywhere near me or contacting me through other people. Of course, Rebecca said. I'll call them right now. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I thanked her and hung up, hands trembling. Tommy was looking for me at the hospice, the place that meant the most to me, where I honored my dad's memory. Nothing was sacred to him. Andrea suggested we call Officer Bradley again. He took the information and said he'd follow up with the hospice to get security footage. If Tommy had violated the restraining order by trying to get information about me, they could arrest him. That night, I had a nightmare about Tommy. In the dream, he was following me through an endless hospital corridor, always just around the corner, always just out of sight. I woke up gasping for air, sweat-soaked and disoriented. Andrea made me tea and sat with me in the kitchen. You need more support than just me and your mom, she said gently. Have you thought about a support group or therapy? I hadn't. The thought of sharing this nightmare with strangers made me cringe, but Andrea was right. I needed help processing what was happening. The next morning, I found a therapist who specialized in trauma and stalking victims and made an appointment for the following week. I also discovered a support group for stalking victims that met at the community center. I was nervous about going. What if Tommy somehow found out and showed up? But Andrea offered to come with me and wait outside. The group was small, just 6 other people plus the facilitator, a calm woman named Corey. As each person shared their story, I was struck by how similar the patterns were. The escalation, the isolation, the fear. When it was my turn, I surprised myself by telling them everything. even the part about my dad's ashes that I'd been too ashamed to tell anyone but my mom and Andrea. No one judged me. No one told me I was overreacting. Instead, they offered practical advice. Nathan, who'd been stalked by an ex-girlfriend for 2 years, suggested I get cameras for wherever I moved next. Melissa, whose stalker was a former coworker, recommended I vary my routines and check my car for tracking devices. I left feeling both terrified, hearing how persistent stalkers could be, and strangely comforted. I wasn't alone. Other people had survived this. I could too. The next day, I got a call from Officer Bradley. They'd reviewed the hospice security footage and confirmed Tommy had been there asking about me. It was a clear violation of the restraining order. They were issuing a warrant for his arrest. Relief flooded through me. Maybe this nightmare would finally end. Maybe they'd lock him up and I could start to rebuild my life. But Tommy seemed to vanish. Despite the warrant and increased police efforts, they couldn't find him at his apartment or workplace. His parents claimed they hadn't heard from him in days. I was simultaneously relieved he wasn't around and terrified of where he might be lurking. 2 days later, I found a new apartment in a building with security and moved in with Andrea's help. I didn't tell anyone my new address except my mom, Andrea, and my boss. I installed a security system with cameras and got new phone number. For the first time in weeks, I felt somewhat safe. I returned to work the following Monday. Morgan had arranged for security to escort me to and from my car, and my coworkers were understanding, if a bit awkward around me. No one quite knew what to say to the girl whose ex-boyfriend fed her father's ashes to her and then stalked her. A month passed without any sign of Tommy. The police still hadn't found him, but I was starting to relax slightly. My therapist, Dr. Greer, was helping me process not just the trauma of Tommy's actions, but also my unresolved grief over my dad. The support group became a weekly anchor, a place where I could speak freely about my fears without being told I was overreacting. I even started volunteering at the hospice again, though only during daylight hours and with security aware of my situation. Playing Scrabble with the patients helped me reclaim that ritual from Tommy's taint. Then one evening, I came home from work to find a package outside my apartment door. No shipping label, just my name written in familiar handwriting. I froze, keys in hand, staring at it. How did he find me? How did he get past building security? I called Andrea, who came right over. Together, we called the police, who sent an officer to examine the package. It contained a framed photo of me, taken recently, outside my new workplace, with the glass shattered. Tucked into the frame was a note. Broken glass, broken promises. I'm still watching. The officer took the package as evidence and increased patrols around my building. I spent the night at Andrea's again, too scared to stay alone. The next day, I met with Officer Bradley, who looked grim. We're doing everything we can to find him, he assured me. But in the meantime, you need to be extremely careful. Change your routines, check in with someone regularly, consider taking a leave from work. I nodded, numb. Just when I thought I was getting my life back, Tommy had yanked the rug out from under me again. I felt like a prisoner, trapped by his obsession. That weekend, my mom came to stay with me. We were making dinner together when my phone rang. Another unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. Hello? Sasha, it's Ralph from the front desk. There's a delivery guy here with flowers for you, but he doesn't have an ID badge. Should I send him up? My heart raced. No, don't let him in the building. Can you describe him? Ralph described someone who sounded nothing like Tommy. Older, balding, wearing a delivery uniform, but still, I wasn't taking chances. Please tell him to leave the flowers at the desk. I'll pick them up later. An hour later, my mom went down to get the flowers. They were lilies, my dad's favorite, the same kind Tommy had sent before. The card read, "Missing you. We'll be together soon." I called Officer Bradley again, my voice shaking. He promised to check the building's security cameras and put a patrol car outside overnight. I barely slept, jumping at every sound. The next morning, Bradley called with news. The delivery man was legitimate. He worked for a local florist and had an order placed online. The credit card used was stolen. The trail led nowhere. I felt like I was losing my mind. How was Tommy always one step ahead? How was he finding me despite all my precautions? That afternoon, I went to my support group, desperate for advice. Nathan suggested I check my phone and laptop for spyware. Melissa thought Tommy might be tracking my car somehow. After the meeting, Nathan helped me check my devices. Sure enough, there was spyware on my phone, probably installed during the break-in at my old apartment. I'd gotten a new number but kept the same phone. We wiped it completely and I bought a prepaid phone to use temporarily. Melissa's boyfriend Blake, a mechanic, offered to check my car. He found a small tracking device magnetically attached under the rear bumper. The discovery made me sick to my stomach, but also gave me my first real clue. Tommy had been tracking my movements all along. With the tracker removed and my phone clean, I finally had a chance to disappear from Tommy's radar. Andrea suggested I take a week off work and stay with her cousin in a town 2 hours away. No one would know where I was, not even my mom, just in case Tommy was watching her too. I agreed, desperate for even a temporary escape from the constant fear. I packed a bag, left my car at Andrea's, and she drove me to her cousin's place that night. For the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. The next morning, I woke to texts from both Andrea and Officer Bradley. They'd arrested Tommy. He'd shown up at my apartment building in the middle of the night, trying to get past security. The officer on patrol had recognized him from the description and photos. He was in custody, charged with violating the restraining order and stalking. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt a strange emptiness. Would this really be the end? Or would he find some way to continue tormenting me, even from jail? I stayed at Andrea's cousin's place for the full week as planned, trying to process everything. I spoke with the district attorney handling Tommy's case, who explained he was being held without bail due to the severity of the stalking and his flight risk. They wanted me to testify at his hearing the following week. The thought of facing Tommy in court made my stomach churn, but I knew I had to do it. This might be my only chance to make sure he couldn't hurt me anymore. When I returned home, I found my apartment exactly as I'd left it. No break-ins, no creepy gifts. Officer Bradley had increased patrols around my building, and security had been briefed with Tommy's photo. For the first time in months, I felt something close to safe. The day before the hearing, I met with the DA, a no-nonsense woman named Janet, who walked me through what to expect. Tommy's lawyer would try to paint him as a heartbroken boyfriend who made a mistake. They'd try to minimize the Ashes incident as a misguided attempt to help me move on. They might even try to make me look unstable. Just tell the truth, Janet advised. Don't let them rattle you. The evidence is on our side. The restraining order violation, the tracking devices, the stalking. We have enough to put him away for a while. That night, I barely slept, rehearsing what I would say in my head. I needed the judge to understand that Tommy wasn't just a jilted lover. He was dangerous, calculating, and cruel. The morning of the hearing, Andrea picked me up early. We met my my mom at a cafe near the courthouse, and she handed me something wrapped in tissue paper. I found this at an antique store, she said softly. I thought you might want it. Inside was a small, beautiful urn, similar to the one that had held my dad's ashes. I looked at her questioningly. I saved some, she admitted. When we first got the ashes back, I kept a small portion in a locket I wear. I thought you might want to have some again, to know that he's still with you, in the right way. Tears filled my eyes as I hugged her. It wasn't everything, but it was something, a piece of my dad that Tommy hadn't desecrated. I tucked the small urn into my purse, feeling stronger somehow. At the courthouse, I sat with Janet, trying not to look at Tommy across the room, but I could feel his eyes on me, burning into the side of my face. When I finally glanced over, he smiled at me. Not a normal smile, but something twisted and possessive that made my skin crawl. The hearing began. Janet presented the evidence methodically. The restraining order, the break-in, the tracking devices, the continuous harassment. Then it was my turn to testify. I walked to the stand, took the oath, and faced the judge. As I began to speak, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was my chance to reclaim my story, to make sure everyone understood exactly what Tommy had done. I told them everything. About my dad's death, about Tommy's support that turned to control, about the brownies and the ashes. I described the stalking, the fear, the way he'd infiltrated every aspect of my life until I felt like I couldn't breathe. My voice didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just told the truth. Tommy's lawyer tried to paint me as emotionally unstable, suggesting I'd misinterpreted Tommy's caring gestures because of my grief. He implied the ashes incident was a misunderstanding, that Tommy had only been trying to help me move on in an admittedly unusual way. But I stood firm. When he asked if I had any proof that Tommy had actually put my father's ashes in the brownies, I looked directly at Tommy for the first time. He told me himself. He was proud of it. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about holding on to my grief instead of prioritizing him. Tommy's face contorted with rage for just a second before he composed himself, but the judge saw it. Everyone saw it. After I stepped down, Tommy took the stand. He put on a show of remorse, claiming he'd made a terrible mistake with the ashes, but had only been trying to help me. He said his actions afterward were born of concern for my mental health, that he was worried about me being alone. I watched him lie smoothly, convincingly, and felt a chill. How many people had he fooled with this act? How many would he fool in the future if he walked free? But then Janet cross-examined him, methodically poking holes in his story. Why did he need tracking devices if he was just concerned? Why did he violate the restraining order? Why did he break into my apartment and leave threatening messages? Tommy's mask slipped again, just briefly. She belongs with me, he snapped. She needs me. She just doesn't realize it yet. The courtroom went silent. Tommy seemed to realize his mistake, backtracking quickly, but it was too late. The judge had seen the real Tommy, the one I'd been running from for months. When the hearing ended, the judge ruled that Tommy would remain in custody pending trial. The charges were serious enough that he could face significant jail time. Janet looked pleased as she explained what would happen next. Formal charges, a trial date, possibly a plea deal if Tommy and his lawyer realized how much evidence we had against him. As we left the courthouse, I felt lighter somehow. Tommy was behind bars. He couldn't track me, couldn't leave me gifts, couldn't show up at my workplace. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. That evening, Andrea, my mom, and I had dinner together at my apartment. We didn't talk about Tommy or the hearing. Instead, we shared stories about my dad, funny memories, inside jokes, the little things that made him who he was. I showed them the small urn my mom had given me, now sitting on my bookshelf next to a photo of my dad. I think I'm going to volunteer at the hospice again this weekend, I said as we cleared the dishes. Play some Scrabble with the patients. My mom squeezed my hand. Your dad would be proud of you, not just for how you've handled all this, but for how you've honored his memory. Later, after they'd gone home, I sat on my couch looking at the small urn. Tommy had tried to take so much from me, my safety, my peace of mind, even my memories of my dad, but he hadn't succeeded. I was still here, still standing, still finding ways to honor my father that meant something to me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be a trial, more testimony, more facing Tommy across a courtroom. And even after that, the trauma wouldn't magically disappear. But for the first time since finding that empty urn in my apartment, I felt something like hope. I took out my phone and texted Andrea, "Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." Her reply came quickly. "That's what family does. We show up, we stay. We don't let the Tommies of the world win." I smiled, set my phone down, and picked up the book I'd been trying to read for months, but couldn't focus on. Tonight, I would read a chapter. Tomorrow, maybe two. Small steps toward reclaiming my life, one day at a time. I settled into a routine over the next few weeks. Work, therapy with Dr. Greer, support group meetings, and weekend volunteering at the hospice. The trial was set for 3 months out, which felt both too soon and not soon enough. I wanted this whole nightmare behind me, but the thought of facing Tommy again made my stomach twist into knots. Janet, the DA, met with me regularly to prep me for testimony. She was confident about our case, but warned me that trials could be unpredictable. Tommy's lawyer was pushing for a plea deal, reduced charges in exchange for Tommy agreeing to move out of state and continue psychiatric treatment. "What do you think?" I asked Janet during one of our meetings. "Should I agree to the plea?" She tapped her pen against her legal pad. "That's entirely up to you. A trial means testifying, being cross-examined. It can be traumatic, but a plea deal means he might get a lighter sentence." I thought about it for days. Part of me wanted to avoid seeing Tommy again at all costs, but another part needed the closure of a trial, needed everyone to hear exactly what he'd done. I finally decided against the plea deal. I wanted the full weight of the justice system to come down on Tommy. Janet nodded when I told her, like she'd expected this answer all along. "We'll be ready," she said. 2 weeks before the trial, I got a call from Officer Bradley. Tommy had been caught trying to send me a letter from jail, which violated the no-contact order the judge had imposed. "What did it say?" I asked, not sure if I actually wanted to know. Bradley hesitated. "It was disturbing, mostly about how you two were meant to be together, that he'd done everything out of love." I felt sick, but also strangely validated. Even behind bars, Tommy couldn't help but show his true colors. This would only strengthen our case. The weekend before the trial, I went to the hospice as usual. I was in the middle of a Scrabble game with Elijah, one of the long-term patients, when Rebecca pulled me aside. "There was a woman here yesterday asking about you," she said quietly. "Said she was Tommy's mother and wanted to apologize for her son's behavior." My heart started racing. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing, of course. We have strict instructions not to give out any information about you, but she left this." Rebecca handed me an envelope. I stared at it, afraid to touch it. "Did you open it?" Rebecca shook her head. "I thought you should decide what to do with it." I took the envelope cautiously and slipped it into my purse. I finished my game with Elijah. He crushed me with a triple word score on Quixotic and headed straight to Andrea's apartment. We opened the letter together, both wearing kitchen gloves like amateur crime scene investigators. Inside was a handwritten note. Sasha, I'm so sorry for what my son has done. I had no idea he was capable of such cruelty. I found your father's urn hidden in Tommy's closet when I was packing up his apartment. There are still some ashes inside. I want to return it to you. Please call me. There was a phone number at the bottom. I stared at the note, my hands shaking. It could be a trap, Andrea said immediately. Tommy could have put her up to this. I nodded. I'll call Janet. The DA advised me not to contact Tommy's mother directly. Instead, she arranged for the police to reach out and retrieve the urn if it really existed. 2 days later, Officer Bradley showed up at my door with a familiar ceramic container. Forensics confirmed these are human remains, he said gently. We can't verify they're your father's without DNA testing, but I took the urn with trembling hands. It wasn't empty. There was still some ash inside. Not much, but something. Tears streamed down my face as I thanked Bradley. That night, I placed the recovered urn next to the small one my mom had given me. It felt like getting a tiny piece of my dad back from Tommy's clutches. The morning of the trial arrived cold and rainy. I dressed carefully in a simple blue dress that Dr. Greer had helped me pick out. Professional, but not too formal. Something that would make me feel strong, but not like I was trying too hard. Andrea and my mom flanked me as we walked into the courthouse. Nathan and Melissa from my support group were already there, saving seats. Their presence gave me strength. Tommy was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked thinner, his usual confident smirk replaced by something more calculated. He tried to catch my eye, but I focused on Janet instead, who was arranging her notes at the prosecution table. The trial itself was both exhausting and anticlimactic. Janet presented our case methodically. The restraining order violation, the tracking devices, the break-in, the continuous harassment, the Brownies incident. She had photos, police reports, testimony from the hospice staff, building security, and even Tommy's own mother, who confirmed finding the urn in his closet. When it was my turn to testify, I felt surprisingly calm. I told my story clearly, without breaking down. Tommy's lawyer tried to paint me as emotionally unstable, suggesting I'd misinterpreted his client's caring gestures because of my grief. So you admit you've been emotionally fragile since your father's death? He asked. I've been grieving, I corrected him. That doesn't make me unstable or unable to recognize when someone violates my boundaries and desecrates my father's remains. The lawyer looked taken aback by my directness. He tried a different angle, suggesting that perhaps Tommy had only pretended to put the ashes in the Brownies to shock me out of my grief. Then why did he have the urn hidden in his closet? I asked. The lawyer had no good answer for that. Tommy testified in his own defense, putting on a show of remorse. He claimed he'd made a terrible mistake with the ashes, but had only been trying to help me move on. He said his actions afterward were born of concern for my mental health, but Janet was ready. She presented the letter he'd tried to send me from jail, full of possessive language and thinly veiled threats about how we were meant to be together forever. She showed the judge the tracking receipts found in his apartment, proving he'd purchased multiple devices. And most damning of all, she played a recording of a jail phone call where Tommy told a friend he was just telling these people what they want to hear, so he could get out sooner. The trial lasted 3 days. On the 4th morning, we returned for the verdict. I squeezed Andrea's hand so hard I was afraid I might break her fingers. The judge looked directly at Tommy as he delivered his decision. The evidence in this case is overwhelming, he said. The defendant has shown a pattern of obsessive, controlling, and deeply disturbing behavior. The desecration of the victim's father's remains shows a profound lack of empathy and respect for basic human dignity. Tommy was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment, followed by 10 years of probation. He would not be allowed within 1,000 feet of me upon release, and any violation would send him straight back to prison. As the bailiff led Tommy away, he turned to look at me one last time. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to show fear. His face contorted with anger before he was pulled through the door. Outside the courthouse, I hugged Janet, thanking her for everything. She smiled and handed me her card. Call me when he's up for parole. We'll make sure the restrictions stay in place. That night, my mom, Andrea, Nathan, Melissa, and a few other friends from my support group came over for dinner. We didn't celebrate exactly. It felt wrong to celebrate something so painful, but there was a sense of closure, of a chapter ending. What will you do now? Nathan asked as we sat around my living room with cake and coffee. I hadn't thought much beyond the trial. For months, my life had revolved around staying safe from Tommy and preparing for court. Now I had a future to figure out again. I'm thinking about going back to school, I said, surprising even myself. Maybe social work or victim advocacy. I want to help people who've been through similar situations. Everyone nodded approvingly. Melissa raised her coffee mug in a toast to new beginnings. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in over a year. I made coffee and sat by my window, watching the city wake up. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrea. How are you feeling today? I thought about it for a moment before replying, free. I spent that day cleaning my apartment, throwing out things I no longer needed, rearranging furniture, physical changes to match the emotional ones. I even painted my bedroom a new color, a soft green that reminded me of the park where my dad used to take me as a kid. That weekend, I went to the hospice as usual. Rebecca greeted me with a warm hug. We heard about the trial, she said. We're all so relieved. I nodded, unpacking the Scrabble board I'd brought. Is Elijah up for a rematch? He destroyed me last time. Rebecca's face fell slightly. Elijah passed away on Tuesday. It was peaceful. His family was with him. I felt tears prick my eyes. That was the reality of volunteering at a hospice. You formed connections with people who were at the end of their journey. It hurt, but it also felt important, meaningful. Who else might want to play? I asked, wiping my eyes. Rebecca led me to a room where a new patient, an elderly woman named Corey, was sitting up in bed reading. Corey, this is Sasha. She comes in on weekends to play Scrabble. Are you interested? Corey's face lit up. Scrabble? I used to play with my husband all the time. He always said I cheated, but really, he was just a sore loser. I laughed and set up the board between us. As we played, Corey told me about her life, her 50-year marriage, her 3 children, her career as a high school English teacher. I told her a little about myself too, including my dad, and how playing Scrabble was my way of honoring him. That's beautiful, she said, placing tiles to spell memory on a triple word score. The people we love never really leave us, you know. They become part of who we are. After the game, Corey won, naturally. I drove to the cemetery where my dad was buried. I hadn't been there since before the whole nightmare with Tommy began. I placed fresh flowers on his grave and sat on the bench nearby. I miss you, I said quietly, but I'm doing okay. I think you'd be proud. I stayed until sunset, then drove home feeling peaceful. My phone rang rang just as I was parking. It was Dr. Greer checking in. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better than expected," I replied honestly. "It feels like I can finally start moving forward." "That's good to hear. Remember, healing isn't linear. There will still be hard days." I knew she was right. There would be days when the trauma felt fresh again, when I'd check my locks 3 times before bed, when I'd jump at unexpected noises. But there would also be days like today, days when I felt strong, resilient, capable of building something new from the ashes of what had happened. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run, something I hadn't felt safe doing in months. The city was quiet, just starting to wake up. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, then stopped at a coffee shop I'd never been to before. As I sat sipping my latte, I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. I started making a list of things I wanted to do now that I wasn't living in constant fear. 1. Apply to social work programs. 2. Take that cooking class I've been putting off. 3. Maybe adopt a cat. Non-gabade. Plan a weekend trip with Andrea. 5th. Start dating again eventually. The last item made me pause. The thought of being vulnerable with someone new was terrifying after what happened with Tommy, but I didn't want him to take that from me too. The possibility of connection, of love. Not now, I decided, but someday, when I'm ready. I finished my coffee and headed home, the morning sun warm on my face. For the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to whatever came next.